Good morning. My name is Jack Corliss, and I'm a diabetic. I'm also one of your students here and have been having a good time at this point. I want to start off with a conversation with a father, his concerns and frustrations with his son. I have a very good friend. He immigrated from the United States from Mexico almost 20 years ago with his wife, his first son. Been working as a wait staff for a local restaurant in Riverside for over 15 years. His wife works in a factory. And I've been friends with him for over 15 years. And every month or so, when he finishes shift on a Saturday, he'll come over to my place and we'll have 2 or 3 Negro Modelos. And then the conversation comes up around his family. So he'll talk about the issues his parents might have coming from Mexico for a visit. His dad has recently died, had been a diabetic. But his concern has always been about his sons, how to do well and so forth. And one of them is Manuel. He's just turned 13. And she's been very concerned about him because he's been getting overweight, very large. And so, I tell him not to eat, I tell him to cut back, I tell him to stop drinking the soda, but they never obey me, they don't listen to me and so forth. So at one point I said, well, Jesse, tell Manola that would he like to grow up and be like Abuelo? They call me Abuelo, the grandfather, because of my age. And as I said that, an epiphany then just hit me at that moment. Dawned on me that Manuel could develop type 2 diabetes at that moment, even though he's not 40 years old, like when I got it. That really hit me, because it was like, once he as 13 gets it, it's going to be a real rough hoe for him and for his family. So at this point I having joined a course, it was a convergence of that conversation I had with Jesse and the course, and why I'm going to public health, that my work starts. It was with this. So I've been focusing on looking at type 2 diabetes, not for me, for old guys, but the young people who were at that age. Type 2 diabetes just arrives too soon for these folks. Given the prevalence of children obesity has led to a lot of problems, and one of them has to do with having type 2 diabetes mellitus, T2DB, showing up much sooner than expected. And we've learned in class that's one of the 3 of new cases of diabetes for younger than 18. Depends again on the ethnic composition. The ADA, the American Diabetic Association, reports 20.1 million, of which 280,000 were under the age of 20. And then, if you notice that, the annual incidence of diagnosed diabetes in youth has estimated over 18,000 for type 1 and 5,000 for type 2. Now, growing up as a kid, I was aware of diabetes, which now we realize is type 1. But for me, there were like skinny kids, white kids, who were kind of weak, and I know we had to worry about them. Something will happen, and you have to go find sugar somewhere, a candy bar or soda, that kind of thing. And that was kind of it. I had no sense about what type 1 was beyond that. And then later, I noticed that African American had diabetes. So that's their version of it. Not putting it to go for myself. So with diabetes 2, as we know, for young folks, again, it's the diet. Kind of think of the food that we're eating now, our diet, the nature of processed foods that we have. Been following a little bit discussions about the use of high fructose in lieu of sugar in things. I mentioned in one of our postings that in Mexico, Coca-Cola is very popular, okay? 7-Up as well. But the companies that make 7-Up, make Pepsi-Cola, make Coca-Cola, they don't use fructose, they use cane sugar. And that's why when you go to Mexico and taste Coca-Cola, you go, my God, this is really great. This is like when I was a kid that really enjoyed Coca-Cola. So when the children then come to Mexico, to the United States rather, then it changes. It goes from, you know, the canned sugar to the high fructose. So there's been concern in Mexico because Coca-Cola is thinking now to change the ingredient from cane sugar to high fructose because it's cheaper. They'll make a little bit more money on the Coca-Cola. So that's pretty obvious. The overweight, the obesity, and the nutrition issue would kind of show that. But also an important thing that I think, and I've read this not so much in papers about in the United States, but I read one about India, and that is that the problem is the loss of playtime in schools. Okay, when I grew up as a kid, when I was a young kid in school, we had playtime. We were playing for a half hour at lunchtime. There was a lot of running around, you know, recreation, running around, that kind of thing. Well, because of the curriculums in schools, okay, there's a lot less of playtime in schools. So where do they go to have that, you know, that activity? Well, safety in the streets. Well, there's an issue. Because of the concerns about perception of safety in the neighborhood. What happens now with kids when children go to school? You go to school and you pick them up and you drive them home because there are concerns about going on the streets, about safety and so forth. So there's a lot of that kind of activity that it cuts down on the activity. And then of course what's obvious to us now is we used to call it too much TV. Well, young people don't watch a lot of TV, okay? They have non-academic screen time, you know, because of the internet, you know, the phones and so forth, playing the games. So those issues add to this issue of the activity. Now, one of the frustrations of working this project, trying to get a feel for information about prevalence, incidence, that really dealt with the youth, young folks between 12 and 18, is because it's a new thing, type 2 diabetes with young folks, okay? I mean, it's been around for 2 or 3 decades, but when you look at all the reports, the government reports and so forth, it's 18 and over, 18 and over, 18 and over. It's been a challenge to try to find tables that just really specific to the young folks. And so there's a group that set up called Search for Diabetes in Youth. There's a study that was conducted in around 2000. They set up 5 different sick centers that they had been tracking the use of, the prevalence and the incidence of diabetes, type 2, 1 and 2, but for young folks. So now they're they're a clearinghouse for this kind of information. Very, very, very useful. Now they're supposed to go on through 2015. I'm not sure what happens after that, whether the CDC then starts to, do you know anything about that, if it shuts down or what will happen with this group? Okay, we'll have to find out. So with them, we have the prevalence of type 2 for children increase in an 8-year period by 35%. With young Hispanics, 45 per 1,000 has went from 0.45 to 79. Black youth still have the highest, and then white are the lowest. Well, not the lowest, but they're coming in. And then there's been not much changes. At least until recently, there hasn't been a lot of changes with Asian Pacific Islanders. Like I said, the challenges was trying to CDC focus on persons 18 and over. So the search put out recently a National Diabetes Statistical Report, 2014. They released it in different parts, June, May, and so forth. And so now, can you see this at all? Any luck?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is now the most recent presentation of new cases of T1 and T2. Okay, this is for those who are aged 10 years, less for 10. Okay, so take again, with the overall 22.2, boys 2.8. Blacks still have number 1. And now here is the 10 to 19 that was reported in 2008, 2009. So here we see here that number 1, it is non-Hispanic blacks have the highest rate, followed by Hispanics, 17.1%. You can start to see why I'm really interested in this area with my friends that I have. The 28.9% rather rate is, there's a note that didn't come up here, was to say that there was an anomaly of the nature of the studies. Study participants from that particular group. So they say very clearly on their report, don't trust it. Okay. Now, if you could see this is my neighborhood. I have been living in North Riverside for over 30 years. So you get a sense of between the towns I live in, near Cicero, Jesse lives in Berwyn, and then close to it is Stickney. North Riverside is where I live as a tenant for, like I said, 30 years. And those who own the property, they live in Riverside. Okay, so you can get a feel here. You can take a look at the median, income here. But if you notice here, if you take a look at the Hispanic Latinos, so for Cicero, it's almost 87% is this group. Berwyn, where Jesse is 59%. Stickney, 51%. Okay, North Riverside, almost 24%. And if you compare that with the white, Riverside has got one of the largest groups of whites, 67%. And then Riverside, 10%, still kind of high for Riverside compared with the 85%. Why would we have just a high number of Hispanics, Latinos living in North Riverside and in Riverside? Why would they be doing there? The schools. Riverside has one of the best school systems in Illinois. So families actually move out of Cicero in Berwyn to try to get into North Riverside if they can afford the rents, or Riverside, in order to get to the schools. So that's what's happening in that area. And then you get a feel for the number of, so that's our Hispanic level. So you can, again, to focus on the Cicero and the Berwyn and all the way through. It's a large group there. And then also take a look at the language other than English is at home to get a feel here. And then you get a feel for the level below poverty. You can take a look a bit about the children under 5. Cicero, 34% under 18. They're 28%. Okay, in Berwyn, again, start to feel this group that might be getting near for that. When I talk to colleagues at work, they're very surprised to find out that type 2 is not just limited to the United States. It's also, it's a global issue, and there are major cities that have been printed or published having to deal with the children obese. Help me with the word obese children. Even a recent conference I noticed in Q8. In following the Facebook, I follow the Syrian stuff going on, the different groups that are fighting each other. And so they have pictures of Ramadan, and they're having dinner, and you'll see Pepsi Cola, and you'll see Coca-Cola. Now they're caffeine free. Okay, you can notice the label. So it's kind of fascinating there. They project that By 2030, there'll be 366 million persons for diabetes. So my message here is that it's global. Now this is the new results that came out from ADA to show you. So you could see that the percentage of Hispanics is 12.8%, and notice here is that Asians have also increased. That diabetes has popped up in Africa, where before there wasn't much of a change between one year and another. And here's the breakdown by Asians, give you a feel as to what groups are there. And here is the breakdown by Hispanic Latinos. Now these are adults, they're not the young folks. But again, you get the feel here that where the breakdown here is going on. They reported last month that diabetes is still the 7th leading cause, 67,000, and then the point here is that the report is that it's underrated. Only 35–40% are really reporting it. Only 10 or 15% are reporting it as underlying cause. And here's the dollar stuff. Here's the cost of diabetes in the United States, flashed in 2012, 245 billion. Okay, if you didn't have, 22.3% higher than if you didn't have diabetes in terms of your costs. So these things we kind of picked this up. This is the issue of showing signs and symptoms of diabetes type 2. The point here is that it's common in overweight from minority groups, strong family history. So in the case of Jesse, his parents had diabetes, so they're going to be in that area. The testing, the recommendation would be that if there's a family history of type 2 in the 1st degree or 2nd degree, or in a minority race, then consider to get some sort of screening testing here. One problem about diabetes for young folks at the age of 10 and 11 is because that's also the time in their life for puberty. And so puberty has an issue about affecting glucose levels. So this then kind of gets into a little bit of an interface that happens there with it. Okay, the management is pretty much the way it's done with adults. You want to have a goal of reducing the glucose, a healthy body weight, and the hard challenge, the hard issue really for a family is really to get the whole family involved as a unit. I mean, you can't have like, okay, you know, Manuel has to eat this, and the rest of us, we eat that. They really have to somehow pull it together as a unit. It's a major change in lifestyle for a family. And the problem with these kinds of things, when you say to a patient, like even for a child, or even to me when I was getting the stuff about diabetes, when they talk about lifestyle change, like weight management and change your diet and stuff, it's kind of, yeah, right, okay, I know, I've heard this all my life, I got to lose my weight, okay, I got to not do this, I only drink Diet Cola, I don't drink, you know, and I go through this. So it didn't register for a while about diabetes, because I've been hearing the same message all my life about lose your weight, lose your weight, lose your weight. It only was until that I had to take medications. And it wasn't until I had to take insulin that, oh, this is serious. So unless you put in there some of the medication or something of the insulin, it doesn't, you know, it doesn't register. It's kind of an interesting dynamic that young people want to get that, you know, it's a medication that gets them attention to deal with it. Yeah, so here's my point. It doesn't get perceived as a life change, as a serious issue, unless you have involved the medications. So again, for the family, weight management, monitor the glucose monitoring, get them to do a evaluation every 3 months, and to monitor the HbA1c values. There's probably an easier word for that, but I don't remember it. But it's important, that particular test that's done every 3 months, because it provides an overview of long-term glucose exposure. So now it's not a one-shot kind of thing. It really covers a 3-month period, so it's really a good idea. Unless when the physician evaluates the child, then unless that their HbA1c is greater than 9%, if it's greater than 9%, it's pretty serious to start right away with insulin. Even though if you're not sure if it's time 1 or time 2, get it going so that you can get that sugar thing down and then work from there. So they want you to start with the lifestyle change. You have to move to the medication. After that, doesn't work, it's not so much going to go, it's going to get progressive. This is just going to go as they get older. Move to the insulin, a combination of 2. And in all cases, stay with the lifetime changes all the way through. So it's not, okay, you take insulin, you don't have to worry about the weight management. You just got to keep going. Now what I found out, I was surprised, is that so far, FDA only allows insulin and metformin for treatment of children for diabetes. Now there was discussion of one drug, I'm embarrassed I can't remember it. It begins with an R rather. And that was a subject of a paper you gave to us at the beginning of the class last year on meta-analysis.
Oh.
River something.
Like active.
Okay.
That type of drug.
That one is particularly has been discussions about the treatment here for this. I'm repeating this here, telling you about the risk factors here. Notice that in some cases breastfed during infancy is an issue. Okay. They really don't know what causes insulin. They're just trying to get what conditions kind of lead to it here. I didn't say much about pre-diabetes. At first I didn't believe it existed, but pre-diabetes is when there is some symptoms, but it doesn't get that point of the HbA1c that's greater than 6.5. So children could be diagnosed as having pre-diabetes. So that's their shot to try to develop the lifestyle changes, to try to not further, not advance that into diabetes. I had a really good doctor, and she would say, well, your sugar's a little high, but it's okay. Well, your sugar's a little bit okay, but you should really, cut back on this, or you should really reduce your weight kind of thing. Oh, yeah, okay, right. Then one day I had to go see a doctor, but she wasn't there, so I had to do another person to take care of to deal with me. I had a bronchitis kind of thing. And so as she was checking me out, she said, so how's your diabetes going? I went, what? And then that's when I first found out I had diabetes. So she had assumed that I knew that and started to have this question about it. I was quite shocked. I went home, I was pretty dumbed out. Because to me, diabetes meant that's it, you're dead. You're on your way out kind of thing. So I didn't catch that. Okay, you can ask about People 2020. Looked at it. It's really good. It's got a lot of, it addresses the food and nutrition issues. Try to change the way we eat and so forth. Like trying to encourage schools to change their diet in terms of make foods available. Work with companies not to sell stuff that could create problems like this. Well, the different issues of diabetes, it has reasonable goals. Like in this time, we'll have over average of HbA1c measures go down 10%. Things like, and it's pretty reasonable. But it really didn't have, I wasn't able to see guidelines that seemed to address directly the issue of T2, because I think it's new. And I think that's where we need to see if they'll make a change for that particular thing. Issues for teenagers living with diabetes, think about it. The fear that D2, DM can't be cured, can't get reversed. So how are you going to change that conversation with your child about how you have diabetes? You have to get them ready that it'll go from different stages. And as you get to that stage, we'll be with you each time to work with you. It has to go on. You can't just stop it, not have that conversation anymore, because it's going to change. At some point, the medication won't work because, the body's tired, trying to catch up, with the insulin stuff. I need a little bit more help. Okay. Issue I would do with these two, social interactions in schools. This will be an issue for children who have diabetes, because what does that mean for time 2? They're fat, they're obese. So now they're going to be subject to bullying. So they really has to be worked out. The perception is they're false. Issues about dating, sexual activities, recreational drugs, these things are going to start coming up when they're 15 and 16 and so forth. And maybe I'll end with just think about schools. Schools really have in Berwyn and Cicero, this would be a good time for community health programs to develop in that town, make a partnership with the schools, and schools they're supposed to do a student health exam for the 3rd, 6th grades and 9th grades. This is a time, there's a question about diabetes. Well, it's time to really take serious about that question, and then necessarily start to do some of the screening of this point, and change, try to change the curriculum so that you're going to put more play, recreation, exercise in that day, so it's normal to do. The type 2 diabetes mellitus is a real challenge for pediatricians, because they hadn't had to deal with it. They dealt with time 1, but not, and that's really basically the world of endocrinologists. But they never expected in their life that they would be dealing with patients who are young, 15, 14, who are having the disease of a 40-year-old and not sure what the hell they're going to do with that. So the Academic Academy, put together a statement last year as a series of guidelines they can provide to their colleagues, their pediatricians, so they can kind of go through all this. And I won't go through that, but this is what they did. And I'm out of here because I think we're out of time. Any questions or any interest at all? Or?
What happened with the son?
Oh, good story. That's right. They're supposed to ask me that. He is going to attend a new school. He's going to the 9th grade. So because he's enrolling in a new school, he has to do the exam, the student health exam. And I spoke with Jesse to have this conversation about the diabetes, to point out his dad had it and so forth. And one way is to get him through that. And then let's see what happens with the screening, to see if that helps. The second part that's good news is not so much he cuts down the food stuff so much, but all of a sudden he likes to do sports. So he started to do sports in the 8th grade. So he started at, and I noticed when he went to the funeral of his grandfather that he looked different, so he had lost some weight. So the point is he likes the exercise or the sports. I didn't, I hated it. I spend all my time in the library. But that's a good news. And then the father has to really, you know, follow through and go through with the school. But parents really have to pay attention to these schools to see what their programs are, to try to have some kind of education for all students. You know, it's going to be frustrating because, you know, if you do screening, maybe out of 1,000 students, maybe one will be one you have to worry about. So then, why am I going to spend all this money for 999 people to do with this? But you got to do it, because if you don't pay attention to this today, 5 years, 10 years, it's going to be really bad. That's my sense. So that's, yes, it hasn't, so far it has a happy story so far. Good. Thanks for asking. Okay. Any other?